LiveProud podcast powered by Evil Geniuses. As you guys know, it's a podcast where we will discuss the important topics that impact the esports and gaming worlds day in and day out. Every episode, you'll get a chance to hear the thoughts, perspectives, and also opinions from some of your favorite gamers, professionals, celebrities, and influencers. As always, my name is Erin Ashley Simon, and welcome to episode 3. So today we will be discussing women in gaming and the personal experiences from today's guests. I would like to first start off by welcoming my co-host, pro gamer SonicFox, and also our special guest. We have Breanne Harrison-Pollock, co-founder of Ateo, one of the only female-founded businesses in esports. Nicola Piggott, co-founder of another female business as well owned, the Story Mob, and also another one, triple threat, Ashley Kang, founder of Horizon Esports. How are you guys doing?
I'm doing all right.
Doing good.
Good, thanks.
Yeah, doing pretty well.
I want to first start off by asking, when did your passion begin with gaming? Tell me a little bit about it. What was that first game, that first console, that first moment that started it for you all? I want to start with Ashley for this one.
Oh dear, I feel like I'm put on the spotlight. When it just comes to gaming and esports, like, it's just really normal. Like, when I was even 5 or 6, I was playing Prince of Persia, and as I grew up, I just kept, that's a really good game. There was like one of the DOS games, and as I kept growing up, I picked up more games. First I was playing PC games such as, Heroes, Might and Magic. Then later I started playing more, online 1v1 games such as, Warcraft 3. I did try StarCraft, and eventually I was playing a lot of League of Legends, which eventually became my passion and my main major in esports at the moment.
Okay, what about you, Nicola? What was that first passion moment or game or console for you?
So this question always causes me pain because the games that I think are the coolest, the games that I love to like watch and interact with, I'm the worst at. It's one of those things like, you really want to like really cool whiskey, but you're just sort of a white wine kind of gal. I have been playing since I was a kid. Normally, when I was a kid, it was super fun stuff. It was like, Worms 3D and like a bunch of Sega console games. I actually ended up working for Sega. It was my first job in gaming. So that was super exciting. These days, it tends to be a little mix of everything. Like, I like playing the games that I think are cool. I played League for years before I worked at Riot and after. Never got that good at it, but always really loved it. I play a little CSGO. I'm known to shoot my teammates in the head, but that's okay. I play a lot of like storytelling games. I play a little Rocket League. I play a little, I like to dip my toe in everything. I'm kind of a jack of all trades, master of none kind of thing.
Okay, listen, I think that's a great thing about gaming is that you can tap into whatever genre, whatever console, whatever space to continue that interest once you start. Breanne, for you, what was that first moment or what was that first entryway for you into the world of gaming?
Yeah, I think my path is a little bit different than most. I was kind of a casual gamer with my brother as a child, and I didn't find gaming until I was probably in my 20s when I first fell in love with the community. And I found local gaming cafes, and I kind of figured out this whole gaming world, and ended up going to TwitchCon where I fell in love with the community. So I'm still really bad at playing games, but I love to watch people play, and that's kind of where my passion lies. Yeah, I haven't had the traditional kind of gamed all my life. I've only recently kind of fell in love with the space.
And Sonic, for you, you're a pro player. So what was that first passion or entryway for you when it comes to gaming?
My first one had to have been Tekken 3. Tekken 3 is what I first, my very first fighting game I ever touched, and my very first game I ever played in general. It was kind of like life-changing for me. I would have to have literally, like I said, been 3 years old when I touched it, and like that's literally like my earliest memory of like me even like just existing. To be honest, it's like just seeing my family bring home that game, and then I just got addicted like I grew up playing so many different fighting games at that point. Soul Calibur 2, Dead or Alive 3. It just brings back so many memories.
Oh, yeah, definitely brings back so many memories. I mean, I still remember when I was a kid, the first time I came across the Sega Genesis as well as Sonic the Hedgehog. That game itself really brought me into the world of gaming, but it wasn't the game that really brought me into the world of esports. Fighting games as well as COD were two titles and two genres, titles, and franchises that really pushed me into my first esports and gaming experience. And it's really cool how we've all on this podcast have found success in so many different avenues and so many different spaces within esports. Breanne, for you, you found success and found your entryway into esports and gaming via fashion. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I came from a fashion background, and I really kind of fell in love with gaming and figured out there was nobody making quality, innovative apparel for gamers, and realized that I could make a great product that could enhance gaming and would add a lot to the community. So I think that's where my passion really lies, and kind of mixing what does fashion and esports look like and creating kind of this really strong brand and community with it. Is kind of, where my intersection is.
And Nicola, for you, you have found a lane for helping to tell stories and help with communication within the world of esports. So how did you make your way into that field and also leading into co-founding the Story Mob?
Oh man, I got super lucky. So I started my journey in esports with Riot, where I worked on communications for esports globally, and it was a rocket ship. I joined in I want to say 2011, 2012, and that was right when League of Legends esports was about to go pretty stratospheric. So I got to see so many cool moments. I can't even tell you, like walking into a World Cup stadium for the first time and just bursting into tears because of how cool it was and what a big step it was. Like first esports show at the Staples Center, first esports show at Madison Square Garden, or at least that I'd been to. And it just kind of, it exploded my mind in the best possible way. I've worked in comms for nearly 2 decades now. It's super embarrassing. And I've never really been at the forefront of something like this. I worked for, like I said, I was working on Sega and a bunch of other kind of gaming things, but it felt like the luckiest ticket in the world. So we founded the Story Mob about 3 years ago when I left Riot, and the goal was to help people tell interesting, authentic, real stories in gaming, in digital entertainment, and of course in esports, because that's all of our first loves. So yeah, super cool lane. It's amazing when you find something where your passions and your skill set intersect. And I consider myself lucky every day.
And Ashley, for you, you have created such a unique lane for you. And now you are a pivotal reporter and content creator within league competition. So how did you find your way into that space?
That was a very weird beginning for me because I actually come from software engineering background. I was a programmer for 6 years before I moved into esports. So I've been following League of Legends since 2013, and I was based in New Zealand. And my favorite league to watch was the LCK, the Korean league. And because I'm fluent also in Korean, I was watching all those leagues and falling in love with the narratives in the scene. And as I continued to watch the scene, it became really frustrating for me that so many player characters and the stories that go on within the scene and what they say and what they do don't get translated into the Western world due to the cultural and language barrier. And that was very frustrating for me because I believe that the games make you respect the players, but it's the human side of the players that make you fall in love with the players. And I really wanted someone to tell the story, and no one was doing this. So in the beginning, I was just in communities like Reddit, translating those stories like, hey, this player actually likes this or said this on the stream, or player A and B have those narratives. And I was translating them sharing them on communities, and they were getting a lot of traction. And when I saw the traction, and I thought, hey, maybe there is a room or a niche for an outlet in this scene that specifically tried to bridge the gap between the Korean scene and the Western world, and also vice versa. So at some point, I decided to quit my software engineering job in New Zealand. That was back in 2018, and moved to Korea. And that's how Horizon and also the esports journey began.
That's so interesting. It's like, whether you take a leap of faith to enter into this space, whether you worked in the industry, and also take a leap of faith to start your own thing. I think that we've all had moments where we said, you know what, we're going to go full force and do this because it's something that we love and something that we're passionate about. But sometimes when you're passionate about things and you have such a love for an interest that most people do not understand, there's sometimes that weird experience where you have to explain it. I don't know about you guys, but sometimes you have to explain to relatives, but they're like, what do you do for a living? And then you explain it. They're just like, oh, so you just play video games? It's like, no, that's not what it is. And it's crazy. So what are your guys' experience when it comes to having to explain your passion and explain your job, especially within this space? Nicola, I want to start with you.
Yeah, I mean, one of the coolest things about setting up our own company was we got to bring people in that kind of always considered gaming and esports like their dirty little secret, right? Like they would have kind of these corporate, communication jobs, or they'd be working for sports leagues or any of the above. And then they'd go home at night, and check out a stream or tune into a major or, kind of do some fantasy league. And we got to help them put those two together, which is so cool. For me, I think it all comes down to role models at the end of the day, right? Like when I was growing up, I don't think there were a lot of role models that I could point to and say, I identify with them. I'm playing games the same as them. There weren't a lot of women in the space, or at least, we just kind of weren't talking about it. It was like something that everybody did and nobody talked about. So my family, for the most part, don't really get what I do, and that's okay. Like I'm past the point. I brought them to a league event in Wembley once, and they were terrified. But they understand the concept of sport. They know what it's like to root for a team. I was a season ticket holder for my local football club along with my dad. We went every weekend. So there's universal stuff that they understand, and they understand, kind of the comms part of it. When it comes to gaming these days, because I'm surrounded by so many gamers and so many passionate gamers, I find myself explaining myself less and less. But obviously, growing up, you do feel a little isolated when you don't see a lot of people that talk the way that you do. And my friends were, they dabbled in games, but a little mainstream. And so it's when you find your people, it feels like the sun is shining on you. It's an amazing thing. Just kind of misconceptions. People also think it's interesting from a female point of view as well, because people think you only play certain types of games. Or that you don't enjoy, certain types of games. You don't enjoy technical games or complex games. And basically what they're saying is, you're not the type of person that's going to watch a major and understand what's going on, or understand why that team is playing the way that they are. And frankly, that kind of thinking is a little outdated. But like I said, I think you see less and less of it these days, which is cool.
Absolutely. It definitely is still around in the fighting game community, that's for sure. But there's been a lot of strong women that have just been showing up recently. It's been kind of the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it's awesome to see. I especially love it in the fighting community. Those chicks or those women, I should say, are kicking ass. I love watching it.
Absolutely.
Oh yeah, it's so amazing just to see such powerful and strong women on so many different levels and CEO positions and publicists, players. It's just all over, and we're so instrumental to this industry. But sometimes women are not highlighted as much when we talk about certain aspects of the industry. Whether you make a career out of it or whether you, like Ashley, you quit your job and then you moved, how did people react to that? And especially when you explained that, yeah, I'm quitting this job to move to Korea and also contribute with the overall content ecosystem within league competition.
Yeah, it's so strange explaining your job to someone. For example, I step into a taxi and or Uber, and the taxi driver might ask me, "Hey, what do you do for a living?" And I'm like, "I work in esports." And he's like, "So what's esports?" It's about video games. And he might go, "Okay, so do you make video games?" "No, esports is about playing video games." And there is a bit of a silence when the taxi driver tries to grasp that esports, there is a big industry around people who play video games competitively. Then the taxi driver asks, "Hey, so do you play video games yourself?" And no, I actually create content and make video interviews out of people who play video games, which can be a bit of a culture shock and also a leap in thought. But going back to when I was thinking about and eventually did quit my job, it was a bit of a shock to my parents who are quite traditional, Korean parents. And, they were I would say they were decently proud of their daughter, who's like a software consultant, IT consultant, saving up to get a mortgage to buy a house. And one day she goes, "Hey, I might move to Korea where I have no connection and might start working on video games," without any promise of it going anywhere. But I think that was about 6 months period where I slowly tried to convince my parents that esports is a thing, because in their eyes, esports was a bunch of people who are addicted to games, like, bloodshot eyes and like, having back problems, sitting in the basement, like playing game endlessly. And I kept like telling them stories of like, "Hey, there was this big competition in America. Hey, like, esports is actually like a legitimate industry now." And I remember this specific content that I showed them that kind of tipped them over the edge. It was one of the documentary series that I produced called Eyes and World series. It was an episode of a player called Smab. It was made back in 2015, narrating his life, how he first convinced his parents and got into esports and became passionate about esports and his future goals and how he intends to achieve them. And after my parents saw them, they actually started having different conversation with me, saying that, "Hey, I actually understand your world now, that after seeing this content, I thought the esports players were just kids, but they're actually young men who have specific goals and are working towards their goals." So I think that episode not only started a good conversation with my parents and convincing them what esports is, but also reaffirmed the value of esports content, because it goes out to make esports people relatable, not just to people within the industry, but to the people outside of it. So that was actually a very memorable moment for me.
For me personally, it does bring joy when you work in another industry, you get into esports and gaming, and you're able to bring still that passion that you had with other industries. For me, it was traditional sports and music. I work in both industries, and I found a way to bring them into the world of esports and gaming under the umbrella of culture and have those conversations within my broadcast. And for Breanne, for you, you're able to bring that passion, that interest that you have for fashion, and also the interest you have in gaming and combining it together. And sometimes when you combine these two different industries, you have two respective industries that may not fully understand the other. So what was that experience for you in having to explain that passion of implementing fashion within the esports and gaming world to those in fashion, but then also having to explain fashion and also to explain the value of style and lifestyle and aesthetic into the world of esports and gaming, where some may be like, how was that experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we launched Ateo 2 years ago, and we spent about 2 or 3 years in this space before that doing kind of research and talking to a bunch of people and testing our products. And I think, 4 years ago, esports wasn't really a conversation that was happening. I quit my job and I moved to the US with no visa to do this company. And I think my parents thought I was totally crazy. I mean, nobody I even knew what esports was. So it was a lot of explaining, like, yes, there are people who play video games. Yes, this is a thing. I know this is where I need to be. And then the other mountain to climb was like, why do gamers need technical apparel? And I think we've seen, Rachel and I, that kind of perspective dramatically shift in the past even 2 years or last year, where people finally kind of start to really understand, like, there really is a place for fashion and esports, and there really is a place for technical apparel. And my kind of reaction I now get from people when I say what I do is like, that's so cool, makes complete sense. Totally, people need pants to sit in. But when I said that 2 years ago, everyone thought I was crazy. So it's been a lot of just kind of believing in ourselves and our vision to kind of stay focused, and then kind of hoping everyone else comes on board eventually.
And that belief in yourself is so important, especially when you're in a male dominated industry. You know, there are challenges that come with that. You know, at times you may be the only woman in the room or in an email thread or conversation. And there, of course, this industry is filled with different standards or qualification standards, I like to say, that are sometimes placed on women or people who are LGBTQ plus, that unfortunately we still have to deal with to this day. Even for as progressive society has gotten, we still are dealing with these problems. So for you guys, what challenges have you faced when it came to establishing yourself, establishing your presence in such a male-dominated industry? Nicola, I would like to start with you for that one.
Oh boy. Anyone want to swap horror stories? I could be here all night. Let's just do it. Let's group therapy it, guys. We're on it. Yeah, you know, I mean, it's not a surprise to anybody on this call that esports and gaming is pretty male dominated. I've been pretty lucky in my career. Like I've come into esports and to gaming late enough and senior enough that I don't face a lot of the vulnerabilities that somebody early in their career might do. And you know, I'm pretty self-confident, bordering on arrogant. Like I don't allow myself to get shouted down all that easily, and I don't allow myself to be talked to in a way that sort of depreciates my self-worth all that easily either. But it happens. Like when we set up the company, we had just multiple instances, people talking down to us, people, you know, calling us sweetheart when they're signing contracts, people stopping us from going backstage because they think we're somebody's girlfriend. Like I think multiple things make up who I am, right? Like I am a Brit living in LA. I'm a gamer. I'm, you know, a horror movie fan. I'm a music fan. I'm an entrepreneur. Like, and I'm a woman. And at any point, so, you know, like one bit of that is more important than the other. The woman part is obviously the most kind of long running part, but it doesn't define a lot about the way I approach business or the way I approach gaming or esports. Like we're a female founded company, which is so rare in the space. So we get a ton of praise for being diverse just for existing, right? Just for having the goal to set up a company with 3 women. And like that just feels like pleasantly retro to me. Like I don't think I should be getting praise just for being a woman in the space. I think I should be getting praise for like doing cool shit, which hopefully I do. So yeah, I mean, part of me kind of wants to not play into that, but part of me is like, well, you know, it's important to have like identifiable role models.
Yeah. I relate to that so heavily. You have no idea. What do you call it? So, first and foremost, I'm sure, like, if you're like looking at the stream, I'm sure you see a Fox person or on the screen. Yeah, that's me. That's like furryism is like the furry fandom is really, really important to me. I grew up with it just as much as I grew up with the esports community, and eventually I started bridging the two between each other, and a lot of people disagreed with it, with what I was doing, but I determined that nobody was ever going to make me feel bad ever again for doing the things that I like or depreciate me for the things that are even harmful to anybody or my interests, right? Like, furry fandom is just as it's actually one of the biggest communities I know, probably almost as big as esports, to be honest. And I growing up alongside with them as well as a fighting game community, I was like, I want to be able to bridge both of these together and show that somebody like me can be a part of this world and can show the diversity that people have in their interests, alongside as well as being openly advocate about my sexuality and my gender. And I get a lot of flack for that, even to this day. I definitely just started off in this career as I just want to be good at fighting games and call it a day. But over time, I made the sentiment to never stop ever being myself, and I pretty much built my brand off of being unorthodox, eccentric. Even like I embrace the weird stuff. I embrace all the things people consider unprofessional, if you will. Like I will say what's on my mind. I'll never not be authentic, if you will, right? And a lot of people didn't like that, actually. Like I've so many times in esports, I've been told by people, "Hey, lose the whole furry thing." And I was like, "No, no, straight up, I won't." So many times I've been told by people, "Don't talk about your sexuality, don't talk about your gender," because I'm not sure people know here. I identify as non-binary, and I'm like, no, that is part of who I am. It doesn't make up just only who I am, but it's a part of me, and you're gonna deal with it. And slowly over the time of me competing, I started noticing I got this huge following, and I realized that like I want to just be known for my fighting game skills and ability, but with me being myself and advocating for for people to be themselves as well, I became an influencer in that time of also alongside of being a competitor. So
when you represent all of those different communities, like the non-binary, the LGBTQ plus, the furry community, it's so cool to see. But it's such a responsibility, right? Like, do you ever feel the weight of it? Like, are there ever days where you're like, I sort of miss the days of my like anonymity or just kind of being another gamer? How does that balance work for you?
Yeah. If you ever ask any influencer, there will definitely be days that they miss just being not known. Like that, being an influencer is nice and all, but sometimes you like being looked at as a human sometimes as well. When you're idolized and looked up as an influencer, it's very easy to be, whether you're supportive or not, it's very easy to be dehumanized sometimes. And people hold you to much, much, much higher standards when at the end of the day we're all human beings just like any other person, right? So myself pretty much had to grow up really, really quickly, like really, really quickly, for the sake of the people that that support me. Otherwise, I could have gone down a really, really terrible path. But I think I'm doing okay so far. But no, I definitely. Yeah, I was just having a conversation earlier with another popular furry friend, popular furry in the furry fandom, in a private conversation, saying to him like, yeah, I totally miss. We were just talking about this, how we miss the days of just being not anonymous. But for me, it's no longer an option to be able to just, hey, I'm going to go off the grid because it's my job now. But I do envy some people that aren't well known. But I also understand that I hold up a much, much higher responsibility, despite whether I wanted to or not. It's no longer a choice that I can make. It doesn't matter, for the sake of the people that support me and for the sake of the people that need to hear my message.
Yeah, Sonic, if you don't mind me jumping in, there were several things that you said about the standards, people holding you to different standards, and that kind of goes back to what we discussed about these qualification standards that are placed on those who are within, I like to say, underserved communities, especially when it comes to esports. Ashley, for you, you have a very unique position too, because you have there's difference in cultures as well. That some of us may not understand over here in the United States. So for you, when it comes to these extra pressures and extra standards that are placed on women, how have you been able to navigate and especially create that established lane for yourself in such a male-dominated industry?
It's quite interesting because sometimes I feel like dealing with several layers of things. First, there is a debate about that, but I do believe that esports falls somewhat under the larger umbrella of sports, and there is an inherent sexism or expectation of what a woman is in traditional sports, and then within that there are specific esports culture related sexism going on. And also, I'm currently full-time based in Korea, which also has very very specific standards on women. And right now I am an interviewer in Korea, appearing on camera interviewing the Korean players, and I quickly realized that there is a very, very specific role that people have come to expect on what a woman on esports looks like. Usually, like someone who's really, really dressed up, and that's not going against anyone who does decide to dress up. Like, I love those people. Like, so great to look at, but like there was like an expectation placed on every single woman on esports, like, held to like a very high physical standard, and also doesn't know the game too much. So one of the things that I had to overcome, one of the narratives that I had to overcome when I started esports is, hey, she doesn't know League of Legends or esports that well. I remember one of my first interviews with one of the players where I was talking to the person, and he was explaining me the most basics of the game. Hey, in League of Legends, this is a top lane, this is a CS, and I quickly realized that he assumed that perhaps because I'm a woman that I don't know all those terms. And so I actually used a trick. I asked him a very, very game specific question. It was like something about, hey, you use Gwyn's Blade, AD carries often. So do you think that those preferences come from using those champions or the item? And then he actually paused for 5 seconds, and his manner of answering completely changed because he now felt like he was talking to a fellow gamer. But there's just like a one example, and I had to work extra hard, and I am jumping the gun here, and I don't think I had to go through that extra work to establish myself as someone who knows the game. Perhaps for males, like if you're already working in the scene, then you assume that person knows the game. But as a woman coming into the industry, I had to work extra hard just to reconfirm myself as, hey, I don't know why I have to prove that I'm passionate about the game. I still get attacked to this date that, hey, you are in this industry because you're an attention seeker. Otherwise, why would a woman be interested in gaming? Hey, you're here interviewing the players because you want to sleep with the players. I get this comment on every second interview, so trust me. And it's just so bewildering to me that I had to, those questions are being raised, that I had to fight this narratives. Hey, I'm in this industry, that the fact that I know this industry and I'm passionate about this and I'm working hard should be a default understanding, and those questions kept being raised, and yeah, it's just bewildering. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, some people aren't very kind in those regards, and I've always told people treat everybody where you want to be treated, if that makes sense. But then go even a step beyond and treat them how they want to be treated. And with what you're saying, I even it might be a different analogy, but even when I was growing up and being young, like there would be people that because I looked so like only 13, they thought I didn't know how to play, and I mean I definitely found my guilty pleasure in fucking them up afterwards when they didn't know how to when they underestimated me. But no, even in the fighting game community, I see people underestimate a lot of top woman players. For example, one of my favorite players to watch, they go by the name Cuddlecore, and she's a top Tekken player. She's a phenomenal, one of the best Lisa players I've ever met, and I watch a lot of her podcasts about her going through the struggles of being a woman in the esports, and a lot of people just always doubt her or crying. It's just pretty much being sexist to her in the esports community. And when you're saying when you were just saying about how gamers approach you saying, for example, with League of Legends. They were saying how pretty much trying to explain the game to you when you already probably having even more extensive knowledge than even them. That was happening to her too in Tekken, and she was just like fucked them up, and they're just like so bewildered. They're like, a woman really just beat me up, and I'm like, hell yeah, like we need to see more of that. But no, that sentiment exists everywhere in not only just league. It's just that's just everywhere, and it's unfortunate that women have to deal with that.
I was just gonna expand on that. I can completely relate to that, and I might just bring up another quick episode because I often interact with the esports fans, and sometimes they are women. And when I have, because we esports happen to be a human industry, and humans tend to have a variety of different genders and or non-genders. So when I talk to women in esports, women fans in esports, they often tell me, hey, so as soon as I started being a fan in esports, I get attacks on social media or chats or communities that I happen to be involved in, that questions being asked, why are you a fan in esports? And those questions are almost never asked if you are a male fan of esports. Hey, oh, that's so strange that you're interested in League of Legends. How did you even find out? Did your boyfriend teach you how to play League of Legends? Oh my God, that just frustrates me so much. You watch League of Legends, but do you even know what's going on? Oh, who do you think is the most good-looking player in League of Legends? And they are so sick and tired of having these narratives. And one of the fans who's been a fan of esports since the StarCraft days, so she's been a fan for a whole total 10 years, she tells me laughing that, I know I've been playing games before most of the kids even graduated, primary school. And if I go to a League of Legends solo queue and someone recognizes me as that League of Legends fan, I make sure that I go to that lane all the time and solo kills that player. So no one tells me that I don't know the game. And I told her, that's amazing. And I just laughed at that. That's funny. But it's also a bit depressing and frustrating that you have to go that extra miles to prove yourself and assert yourself as someone, assert that you have passion and understanding for the game, which should be a default understanding.
It is so fortunate. It's like we have to go, like you said, over and beyond and be great when, quite frankly, there is mediocrity in the esports world. They're not held to the same standards that are placed on us as women and as underserved communities and individuals in those communities. And Breanne, for you, how have you been able to navigate sexism or just these biases, implicit biases that people have against women or even against you throughout your transition into the esports world and establishing your business?
Yeah, it's been hard. I think, first of all, I'm lucky that I have a co-founder and that I get to do this with someone by my side. So we both kind of watch out for each other and can back each other up. It's really helpful. I think basically what we've realized and what we kind of prepare for is that men are mostly assumed right, and they're mostly assumed like they know what's happening. And that when we walk into a room, most of the time we're assumed we don't know what's going on and we're not going to do a good job. And so we have to work extra hard, and it's in some ways made us better at our jobs because everything we do 100%. We go above and beyond. We make sure it's done perfectly because we want to make sure that our reputation is that we do good work. And it's taken a really long time to develop that reputation. And I think we also, Rachel and I talk a lot about how can we stand up when there is unfair treatment and the kind of line between that, because we are trying to do business with a lot of people in this space. So when you call someone out, they don't tend to like that. But just kind of not reacting also doesn't feel good. So I don't think I have a perfect answer yet, but it's something that, we kind of work through every day.
Speaking about reacting, this is something that I've even experienced in my career, is that we always have to, as women, have that fine balance between being firm, but also it's like if you are too passionate and you're too firm, you're angry, you're an emotional woman. But then if a guy does it, oh, he's passionate. And it's something that's viewed as a positive, while that emotion and that energy that's brought out from women is viewed as detrimental. So have you guys been able to balance the times where you have to be passionate and firm in your position and your morals and your beliefs and your values, but then balancing it where, you know, you may subconsciously have to think, or unconsciously you may be unaware of, like, okay, I can't be too, because I'll be perceived as complicated or emotional or angry, or just all these negative attributes that they place on women whenever we speak our mind. And Nicola, I would definitely want to start with you. I know you're a very strong-willed woman, and you know, especially when you're working in PR, you're probably dealing with so many different personalities all at once.
Yeah, for sure. And it's that sort of air hostess thing, right? Like, you want to be their best friend, but also kind of firm. Also, this is such a politician thing as well. I feel like female politicians get this all the time, right? If you're passionate or impassioned, you're emotional. I do get it, for sure. I had a really frustrating conversation. I won't name who it's with, although hit me up later and maybe I will. With a really senior dude a couple of months ago that kept repeating to me. I was basically advocating for myself on something. It was like a business thing, and he kept repeating to me how emotional I was being. Which is news to me, right? Because I don't think I'm that emotional a person, to be honest. I've never been accused of being like too kind of, you know, cuddly and friendly. I think I'm much more like straightforward and strident, for want of a better word. So it was frustrating to me to hear that word applied to try and reduce me, to try and make me feel like I was, you know, crazy and being irrational and off the map. So I'm very sympathetic towards it. I am conscious of not trying to use it to other women in the space, because, you know, sexism isn't just a male problem, right? It's all of us. Like, we all have inherent biases. It's the same thing as racism or any other kind of ism. Like, you grow up thinking certain things and, you know, and repeating them sort of unconsciously. You don't get to say, I am not sexist, I am not racist, and kind of wash your hands of it and be like, you know, this has got nothing to do with me, all this ugliness. Like, those things are sort of inherent in you from birth, right? Like, certain biases and the way you view the world is going to be, you know, informed by who you are. So I do my best to be empathetic when I face these kind of problems. I don't spend a lot of time, not that anybody should follow this, but I don't spend a lot of time thinking about the injustices done to me at length without trying to solve them, right? Without trying to point out when somebody's being a dick or, you know, treating people poorly. Like, I find that to be much better for my mental health. And so much of the outpouring, I know, you know, we probably don't want to go into it, but like all the stories that were coming up from women in esports and in gaming really recently, about, you know, kind of everything that they've been through really hit home, because it genuinely felt like the reason there was such an outpouring is because there was nowhere else for these stories to go, right? They'd been bottled up for so long. And it felt like the floodgates just opened. And, you know, I would love to get to a stage where we're able to change that, where we're able to just talk about what happens to us as humans on a day-to-day basis and put people right that either know that they're wrong or may not know that they're wrong, right? So, yeah, I mean, kind of rambly, but that's my overall philosophy on it.
One more note to add to that. You get so many people that always say, "Oh, we don't really care about your gender or you being a woman," and then turn around and start saying sexist comments in the chat room the moment you're on stream, or we don't really care that you're gay or anything. And the moment you turn around and start being a bigot, essentially in the chat room. So a lot of really just ignorant and bad people, and then just denying the claim, or even other people supporting that ignorance and bigotry. I really feel that it is up to us to really call that stuff out and be public about it and get these people out, or to reform even, because it's annoying, really, and eventually you just get tired of it.
Yeah, and you know, Nicola, like you were saying, those stories that came up, I mean, it was difficult reading some of those experiences. And for Breanne and Ashley, you know, we don't have to dive into specifics, but How was that moment for you when you guys saw all of these experiences that women were bringing up about their time in esports and some of the toxic and individuals and horrible personal stories that were coming up? How did you guys feel?
In some ways, for me, I think it was kind of a relief because I think we've been watching this behind the scenes happen, and we've all experienced it and seen it. So I mean, it was horrible to read and horrible to hear everything, but in some ways, it felt nice to have it in the open and to have a conversation about it. Um, I hope that from that conversation, real action can be taken. And kind of my fear is that it was just a one time kind of, you know, conversation and it's not going to go anywhere. But I hope that everyone really took a moment to notice and took a moment to really try and understand everything that has been going on so that we can do better going forward.
I do agree with Breanne's sentiment, and it was very disappointing and depressing for me to read a lot of that stuff, but not surprising at all because without getting into examples, I have talked to other female colleagues who have experienced so many similar stuff, but we are also afraid of, speaking up because as an individual, when we do speak about those things, you often get the comments that you are a drama queen or you are making this as a publicity stunt or as a clout chaser, or you simply don't, hey, I don't care. We simply don't want to see this kind of stuff on my feed, on my timeline. So in that way, it was very good to see this uproar of movement of many people speaking at the same time because it also empowered each other to raise a voice and not feel excluded. And it's really important to continue having those conversations, to have this conversation as a norm, because I've seen so many comments where people feel a bit uncomfortable, but those feeling of uncomfortable comes from, like SonicFox said, ignorance. Hey, perhaps those people had been living in a bubble where they genuinely believe that sexism does not exist in the modern industry or esports, and they get a culture shock. And when you get a culture shock, you feel uncomfortable, and the immediate reaction is to push it away or get it out of my sight. But we need to have those uncomfortable conversations. We need to bring those conversations back up on the surface, unless people become more uncomfortable and have those conversations because this is what it is. And rather than bury it under the carpet, we need to change something.
Yeah, I'm like, this is us, right? Like, this is not us doing, like, publicity stuff. I'm like, this is a part of what we identify with. And just because you don't like it doesn't mean that's going to change about us. That entire sentiment of I don't like it, so I don't want to see it. I'm like, no, you're gonna see it. That's that's me, like being a queer in my space. People don't like the fact that I'm so open and proud about my sexuality. And they like to assume that's all I talk about in the esports. And I'm like, that's definitely not true, like at all. Like, not even remotely true. I'm very much an advocate of it, but I talk about so many different problems, and you're insisting that the moment I talk about LGBTQ plus related problems or sexuality related problems, or even just talking about the problems that women have to face in general, they say that's all you talk about, or I don't want to see that. I'm like, no, you're going to see it because these things need to be talked about. And just because it makes you uncomfortable doesn't mean like the experiences that we have aren't very real. Like these experiences that we go through, that's real oppression. That's real like these things are a lot of sentiments that are shared between just, the minorities and communities in general, to be honest, because it's mainly like you get a bunch of in a male-dominated scene where people, especially growing up online in the gaming industry, you really feel like you can get away with saying whatever you want, no consequences. And some people, sadly, don't grow out of that phase, or don't have the empathy to really try to see themselves in somebody else's shoes, and they just try to just essentially be a dick about the entire scenarios. And no, it's up to us to really, really stand together and call it out. And I really, really feel that more of us keep speaking out about these issues and being more public about them, then we can see real change in the esports community.
Sonic, how have you navigated those conversations, especially when all those stories came out? I know that FGC had various different stories that came out. How were you able to navigate those conversations for progressive change, and while also still uplifting the community as well?
Oh, absolutely. I was just like, I had to come, like, some of these people, they were, that, the allegations came out about, some of them were some of my closest friends, and, as close and as, I felt to these people, despite never knowing that they did some kind of, like, heinous stuff like this, I did what I had to do to cut ties with them, because, I need to support the woman that need my support. I think, those people matter a lot more to me, especially since this is their moment for their voices to finally be heard. So it's my responsibility to give them a platform to raise it even higher, if you will. Hearing about all those stories, it did sadden me, because I'm like, it's like the thing that somebody can just do that to another person is just kind of like it just sucks, right? And but seeing also the power of women feeling confident to come out about these stories because they see other women coming about these stories, or just in general, it was also a little bit inspiring as well, because it was seeing these women finally find the courage and the strength to really speak about these issues is something I wish we could see a lot more of, and I understand why we don't see a lot more of it. And I don't fault them or blame them for it either. It's society's fucking scary. That's like pretty much put it. But and they can be very unforgiving sometimes too, especially with some of the oppression that the women in these spaces have to face. But them standing united together, it was really, really inspiring to see, and I wanted to use my platform in any way, shape, and form to really, really raise the voices as high as possible.
Yeah, and it's great that we have so many amazing women on this podcast as well who have utilized their platforms to also uplift other women and uplift other individuals, whether through their work, whether through their content, PR work, and that's the beautiful side of esports and gaming, is seeing so many impactful leaders who are pushing for progressive change and pushing to make this industry more inclusive and embracing so many different kinds of people. So, a question for all of you is, what does it mean for you to be a leader in your respective space within the esports industry? And and I don't even want to just say leader as in terms of just women leaders, but just leaders in general. You all are leading so many different spaces, whether it is as a pro gamer in the FGC, communications within esports, content within the league, and fashion and accessory and aesthetics and just. There's so much that you guys are leading. So what does it mean for you guys to be respective leaders? I'm going to start with Breanne.
Yeah, I think we take that role really seriously. I think for us, it's a lot about creating a safe space to have conversations and a safe space for a community to kind of gather. I think we try really hard to highlight the work that women are doing in esports and gaming and show a path of the careers people can have, and try and connect as many women together as we can. And I think it's even simple things like we launched a women's wear collection last year. And I think it was one of the first products actually just designed for women in gaming. It wasn't a jersey that was turned pink. It was product specifically for women. And I think that even simple things like that really show women that they belong, that they are wanted, that they are included. So I think even, little steps along the way can make a really big difference. But working to make sure everyone feels included and that we are paying special attention to the people who maybe don't get a lot of attention normally.
And Ashley, what about you? Also, congrats on the Esports Award nomination, by the way, as well. I gotta clap it up for you for that one. But what about you? What does it mean to be a leader, especially within the reporting and content space?
I'm doomed on the Esports Awards nomination, but thank you so much. Yeah, it's something that I only started thinking recently, and it's something that I should also think about more often because I'm relatively new to esports. I only moved to Korea and started properly working in esports in the middle of 2018. So it's been a 2-year journey so far. Specifically around the space of being a woman. First, I guess the first way is, again, I didn't want to present myself as someone who's a token, but just as a content creator in the esports scene, someone who is interviewing the players, not just someone who sits there to be pretty. Again, nothing wrong with, being pretty, but that's personally not the brand that I wanted to go for. And there have been so many, and I do appreciate it, and sometimes baffles me that this happens, that there are some female fans who reach out to me, hey, so it's so heartwarming to see that you're creating content as woman, but not portraying yourself in one way, and you're creating diversity in how a woman is portrayed, especially in the Korean esports scene. And that gives me a lot of hope, and I appreciate that. And you're my role model. And I just feel really humbled in those occasions, and I'm trying to navigate through that. It's something that I need to revisit, and perhaps I'll have a better answer in a year's time from now when I thought about it a bit more. And meanwhile, I do try to be quite vocal on my Twitter. I use my Twitter to promote my content quite often, but also I try to talk about those experiences, talk about the early days of, navigating through sexism in esports. And some people will, again, come to me and DM me, say, hey, I didn't want to see that on my feed. Why are you being such a complainer? Everyone deals with it, that kind of stuff. But I think, again, it's so important to revisit those conversations and revitalize them. So for now, that's something I can do and something I probably should do.
You know what, Ashley? I'm going to say for you, you're killing it. Own it, girl. It's not about how long you've been in the industry. It's about the positive impact and the hard work that you're put in. And you've been putting in so much work. I mean, I've only been doing esports broadcasting for about, 2 years, maybe? Close to 3. And at the end of the day, it's like you put in the work and you're reaping the rewards and you can own it, and that's another thing, too. I feel like sometimes as women and just as individuals, it's like, yes, it's important for us to be humble, but also it's okay for us to talk our shit sometimes. Yeah, it's okay to be like, you know what? Oh, I got it.
And this isn't even just esports, even like the furry fandom. Like I see a bunch of artists that are so shy to uplift their art. I'm like, no, it's okay to say, my art's ridiculous. It's okay to say that. Like if someone's gonna try to make you feel like shit, no, they can go to hell. Like you earned that space. Like you deserve every now and then to give yourself a pat on the back. All right, because that's a little confidence booster.
It's so interesting because it's also like esports, especially when it comes to the storytelling of whether it's pro players or individuals. It's often highlighted people being them, but then also at times people are chastised for being them, and it's because we're in the world of the internet where everyone just feels free to say whatever they would like to say. Yeah, everyone is. It's unfortunate, but for Nicola, for you with the Story Mob, you guys really help to change the perspective of different companies, different individuals, different storylines through your line of work. And I remember you and I talked about before just how important it is to just show an all-encompassing viewpoint and really showing humanizing stories within the industry. So why do you feel, do you feel like it's, at times, do you feel like it's important that we tell these stories of like, hey, you're a women pro player or something along those lines, but then how do you find that balance of also just saying like, okay, it's not just about that individual being a woman, it's the fact that they are talented, they're skilled, because there are some people that are like, oh, I'm tired of women talking about their challenges and their obstacles, and it's important that we talk about it, but then how do you do those communication efforts that you show that at the end of the day, it's a human being and we all have similarities?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've got to come up with a decent set of rules for like how are you going to talk about that part of your identity without being exploited for it. So like, I'll give you an example, right? I'm asked to speak on a ton of panels, because I'm so rad, and also because there's so many panels in the esports and gaming world. And half of the time, I'm pretty certain that the reason I'm there is because I'm a woman. Right. So I have a couple of rules that help me figure out whether or not that's a good platform for me, whether that's a good opportunity, and whether or not I should turn it down for it being token. Right. Like, do I feel like I'm the expert to talk on that topic, regardless of my gender? Do I feel like, they've approached how they put the panel together or the event together in a way that's inclusive? Am I the only woman on the panel? Is there, are there more? Does it give me an opportunity to like further my business goals or my storytelling goals in a way that's that's good for me? So eventually I'll be able to come to a pretty safe conclusion about whether or not they're using me, and if they are and I'm using them back, is it a mutually beneficial relationship kind of thing? I think it's important to own who you are and sort of play the hand that you're dealt in a practical way, right? Without allowing yourself to be exploited. So, yeah, I mean, I'm pretty balanced about these things. I think positive change only happens when you make a concerted effort for it to happen, right? So you're not going to change anything until you start talking about what it is that makes you different. And sometimes you're going to get a chance to talk about what it is that makes you different purely because you're different. Right, not because like you're the best person for the job in the eyes of somebody who doesn't really see you when they look around the room, and that's okay. Like I think you gotta play the system a little bit.
I have two rules that I go by, and Nicola, I completely understand where you're coming from, because there's some times where I feel like when I'm used in certain, whether it's speaking engagements or certain broadcasts or events, and not all of them, but sometimes I feel like I'm used as the token black woman, as a diversity quota. And sometimes it's very obvious, and then sometimes I'm just like, okay, this is really interesting. And especially, I've seen it happen a lot more since I've been a very vocal person when it came to Black Lives Matter and the diversity and inclusion issue that we see in esports. And it's kind of like what you're saying, where it's just weighing those situations. But I think another thing too that I have a problem with as well is that when we talk about diversity and inclusion, for some reason there is that correlation of diversity being less qualified. And I think that like one of the things that we're really pushing is to create more inclusion of women and more of a comfortable entryway for women to come into such a male-dominated industry, and especially one that's toxic. So what do you guys think are ways that we can make this industry more inclusive and more comfortable for women, more comfortable for LGBTQ plus and other communities? Sonic, do you want to go first?
Real quick, I just want to touch on something you said right before I delve into.
Oh yeah, no problem.
Part of being in the positions that we are today too is like whether somebody's using you for your for example, for your blackness or your queerness or things like that, you have to weigh that. Is this beneficial for the community, or is this just somebody just trying to get clicks about like trying to talk about a topic, right? And over time, you start realizing when the conversations start getting interesting, like when somebody's being genuine about the issues and problems of the communities that we represent, or when somebody's just asking the basic like generic questions that it's like like when somebody approaches you to speak about on a platform, if things are, like I said before, like interesting or not, which I think is a really, really important thing to, despite if you feel being used or not, you have to weigh if the way you're being used is going to be incredibly beneficial if the word gets out, or is it just going to be another one of those, what do you call it, newspapers that talk about, like, you're just trying to get clicks for, your, whatever you represent, if you will.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge with balancing that. And there's also going to be a challenge for making esports more inclusive and comfortable for everyone. So Ashley, I know this is a very complex question because there's no one right answer right now. And this is something that's going to take probably years for us to really figure out. But what do you think are ways that we can start, at least today, to help make esports more inclusive and more comfortable, especially for women to enter into this space or young girls?
I do agree this is a very complex question and there are so many ways to approach it, but if I had to go in a specific way, it would perhaps be how the broadcasts handle minorities. And I'm not just talking about placing a certain minority and having filling the minority quota in a broadcast. Like, for example, I think LEC has been doing an amazing job on this because I see women in the casters desk. I see women in the interview place. I see women, in the analyst desk, having their own segments, and they're not presented as, oh my God, look, there is a woman in this esports broadcast. They're just being themselves, talking within their unique characteristic, presenting their own ideas, but kind of happen to be women. And I think LEC has done a really, really nice job on being inclusive, but also presenting that inclusivity. We have some women in this LCK broadcast, and that itself is really exciting, but they are kind of there as announcers. For example, when they're kind of there to read out a lot of the questions that the analysts can kind of pick up, and they always come in really tight dresses and just read out questions. And LCK actually made us a between game segment around those women, and it was, hey, those women don't know League of Legends, so we'll bring in some male experts to teach them League of Legends. And I was getting really uncomfortable on how women was being represented in the LCK. It's great that we have women in LCK too, but the roles that they are representing are creating prejudices. And in the end, esports audiences tend to be quite young. They are quite open to accepting new cultures and ideas, including what an esports should look like. And I think how a broadcast represents minorities have a big influence on how, the ideas that shape in the long term. So I think there are a lot of different ways that we can make minorities more inclusive, but I think because broadcasts have a big role to play in that.
Yeah. Breanne, what are your thoughts?
I mean, I think it goes back to something that Ashley said a while ago about doing uncomfortable things. And I think it's a lot of everyone doing things that make them uncomfortable to make sure voices are heard and people get in the room. I think it, is letting someone at the table or standing up when something isn't right, or, including somebody who you might not kind of normally think of. And I think that it's up to all of us to do things that are a little bit outside of our comfort zone to make sure that those things happen. And I think that hopefully that creates some kind of change. But if people just kind of stick in their own circle that they're kind of normally operating in, we're not going to get anywhere. And so we're just, really trying to push ourselves to move outside of that and do more than we kind of think is necessary.
Yes, indeed. Nicola, what do you think are some things that we can do to make this industry more inclusive and especially comfortable for women?
More pink t-shirts. Breanne, can you help us out with that? I'd love that.
I can't do that one for you.
I'm kidding. Okay, so I think the biggest step that I see that would increase diversity is we need to stop letting the wrong people gatekeep what it means to be a part of this community. Mm-hmm. Right. So, the fact that you have to be a certain type of gamer, you have to play a certain type of game, you have to play them to a certain type of level. If you're a cosplayer, you have to be a certain type of one, right? If you use your sexuality or you're a playful kind of casual, any of these things that eliminate people based on these antiquated ideas about what our community should be is so limiting, not just to women, right? To everybody, to all sectors of the industry. So we need to stop like letting the wrong people tell us who we need to be in order to be gamers generally. So I think if we get to a place where we're more comfortable without this obsessive self-measuring of your worth, if you play games, you're a gamer, full stop. And you are equally valid and equally welcome in this community as anybody else. You might have different interests, you might have different, like areas you want to focus on, but you're a gamer. So I think that's the best and most positive step that we can take towards making sure that, it's not just staffed with the same dude over and over who
Esports hand crossing.
pats himself on the back for how hardcore he is and never really thinks about anything else that would, increase his universe a centimeter. So let's do that. Let's kick him off the pedestal.
Yeah. I mean, it's crazy too, because like gaming is universal. So why can't gamers be universal? Why can't they be from all different walks of life, different orientations, different backgrounds? And I always found that was really strange, and I don't know why people think that way. But we dug a lot into the experiences, the obstacles, and challenges. But with every podcast, I like to end on a positive note, on a supportive note, and an uplifting note. And so my last question to all of you is, who are some women gamers, content creators, professionals, or influencers in the industry that you would like to highlight, or ones who've impacted you in some shape or form? Nicola, I want to start with you.
I would be in so much trouble with my work wife if I didn't point out my co-founder, Anna Rotzlandowitz. She's a former ESL and she's a rock star. I would fall down every day of my life without her. In the sports and esports space, somebody I really like at the moment, Aerial Powers. She's a WNBA champion. She's in the bubble at the moment, and she is like doing some of the sickest gaming content. She loves gaming, really into it, really into like, cool opportunities to try new things in the gaming space and stream and learn and, compete. So cool to see somebody who's like a champion in traditional sports and so passionate about this area as well. So shout out to Ariel.
Yeah, shout out to Ariel. Sonic, who's someone for you?
For me, I have three people actually. One would be Vicky Ortiz. She helped me a lot actually. Just seeing her compete and beat everybody, and also be like openly expressive with her gender is really, really helpful for me to be expressive with myself when I first entered in the scene. Cause before I even entered it, actually, because I used to watch her compete a lot. But it really helped me slowly become more comfortable with myself in entering the fighting game community. Then there is Cuddlecore, who is just a top Tekken 7 player. She's black, she's young, she's kicking ass and using her platform to call out all these injustices, and I'm so for it. You have no idea. I think she's one of the coolest people ever, and she's always talking about the struggles and having those uncomfortable conversations before that people aren't willing to have, but she's willing to have, and I think that's sick. And finally, it would be Stephanie Brownback, who is a Q&A analyst for LiveEVIL Studios, who also recently came out as trans woman, and her courage to openly talk about the changes that she's experiencing in her life, I think is really, really brave and courageous, and using her platform to really be expressive about who she really is I think is the coolest thing ever.
That definitely is. Breanne, what about you?
Great question. I think one of the people I've been really excited to watch this year is Avali. She's an LCS host, but this year she has kind of branched out on her own, and she's been doing really interesting content and trying new things and working with different brands. And I think it's really impressive to see someone leave kind of the bubble and do their own thing. I think there's some really amazing women at Cloud9, particularly Emily and May, who I think are doing incredible things behind the scenes to really change the industry. And I think they don't get enough recognition. So yeah, I mean, there's a lot of amazing women in this space. We're lucky to have a lot of people to keep us company.
Ashley, what about for you?
I have to first mention Emily Rand. She is a full-time ESPN esports journalist, and I know that she is known in the scene, but I look at the amount of work she's doing, not just in League of Legends, because League of Legends is already a very big industry, very big cover with like multiple regions, carrying out their competitive splits at the same time, and she somehow managed to cover all of them, as well as covering other esports. And she's creating feature articles. She's branched out to video interviews this year. She's appearing in like a million different ESPN podcasts today. She is literally doing like an army's work, and I just wish that she had more recognition for the amount of work she's doing and the contribution she is making for the esports scene. And also, as I mentioned before, I cover the LCK, the Korean League of Legends scene, quite closely. But this split, I have also branched out to the LEC, as I can interview the players remotely during those COVID times. And because of that, I've been following LEC much more closely in the recent months, and I've been very inspired by the women in the LEC broadcast, such as Sharks, Law, Frostcurrent, especially how they came out recently and spoke their own voice at LEC's recent decision to be sponsored by Neon, and that completely went against the broadcast's belief on LGBT rights, because etc., etc., etc. And they voiced their own thoughts, and LEC took their decision, canceled their decision in about 12 hours, 24 hours. And I just really love the work they're putting into LEC, them being able to speak about various rights, including LGBT plus rights. And I just love them so much. So they also deserve more recognition.
Yeah, they're all amazing women you guys mentioned, and it's great. It just shows you how instrumental we are to the esports industry. And sometimes our stories aren't told, but that's why we have podcasts like this. That's why we have you guys. That's why we have amazing content creators to help uplift women in this space and help to uplift a lot of different people. And of course, because this is an Evil Geniuses Power podcast, I have to bring up this one individual. So the woman I would like to highlight is Nicola Jameson. And the reason why is because, for her to be the first Black woman for a CEO for a top esports organization is amazing. And even like for me, when I was growing up, we didn't see too many, especially Black women in certain positions in gaming and in esports. So to see her in that position, it's going to inspire so many different young girls who are Black to know that they can run a top esports organization and they can be massive leaders within this space. So definitely want to give her props and shout out. And also shout out to the entire Evil Geniuses team as well for putting together this podcast as well to help continue the conversation, to make this industry better for everyone and for all walks of life. And also, I want to say thank you all for being a part of this conversation and keep up the amazing work. You guys are doing such amazing things, and I look up to every single one of you. So I just want to say thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you so much.
It was mad fun. Anytime.
You're welcome. You're welcome. All right, so all the listeners and viewers, like I said before, women have been instrumental in the growth of not only gaming, but now as well as esports. All of us have had to navigate this male-dominated industry, overcoming various obstacles and challenges along the way. We are in a space that needs men and more women to push it into a bigger and brighter future, and more inclusive future as well. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Live Proud podcast, powered by Evil Geniuses. My name is Erin Ashley Simon, and we will catch you all next time.